Good evening. Thank you all for joining us tonight. My name is Jason Weber. I'm the County Fire Chief. I'll start with just some logistics in mind here. The intention of this is about an hour of presentations from land management agencies, fire agencies, law enforcement agencies, the insurance industry, and then we'll roll into question and answers. And in order to diversify the questions as much as possible and give everybody the biggest bang for their buck tonight in a 1 hour window, we ask that you fill out a card with your question or comment on it. We'll sort them by the categories and then try to get as deep as we can through the questions over that course of time and direct the questions to the appropriate panel member. Speaking of panels, I'd like to introduce the supervisors. I'll let them introduce themselves and our sheriff, Robert Doyle, and then we'll get started with the rest of the panel member introductions.
We starting? Oh, okay. Well, thank you all for coming here tonight. I'm Judy Arnold, and being with us in person and those who are watching the webcast, which is being done right now. After the devastating North Bay fire, Supervisor Rodoni and I created a Board of Supervisors subcommittee to develop strategies for a collaborative approach to reduction of life and property should we face a similar incident in Marin County. Disaster preparedness is at the top of everyone's mind, and I think we should take advantage of the interest and engagement that we are seeing now. This committee meeting is an important first step in our work, and I look forward to hearing from those who are joining us today. And now I'm going to turn to my colleague, Supervisor Dennis Rodoni.
Thank you very much. I'm Dennis Rodoni, District 4 Supervisor, and I want to thank Jason Weber and his staff for organizing this event, and my colleague, Judy Arnold, for sharing this important committee with me. And I want to thank you all for attending tonight. We must constantly work together to make sure our communities are safe and prepared for the next emergency or disaster. While we've been meeting with the North Bay agencies and our own staff about lessons learned, tonight's a chance for the public, you, to share your concerns and questions with us. Marin County Board of Supervisors has elevated your concerns by adding emergency preparedness as a 2018 priority. Fire Safe Marin, which Supervisor Katie Rice represents the board on, has worked for over 20 years to make Marin a safer place. Please become familiar with their 2016 Community Wildlife Protection Plan. It's available on their website. I encourage communities to look at becoming a firewise neighborhood and encourage everyone to sign up to alertmarin.org. While we can lead the discussion around lessons learned, it is only with our communities and neighborhoods working together that we can make a real difference and become better prepared. Thank you.
Sure. Is this on?
Yes.
Thank you. I want to acknowledge the board for taking the lead on making emergency preparedness one of their 5-year plan, and I want to thank Chief Weber for chairing this subcommittee. And I think it's important, to hear from all of you today, but it's also important to hear from the people here on the diocese. We can never be prepared enough, and we've met with Sonoma County officials, and unfortunately we'll learn from the tragedies that occurred in Sonoma County, and we saw it firsthand because a lot of the firefighters from Marin County were in Sonoma County, and a lot of law enforcement were there helping with evacuation. So the Sheriff's Office also operates the Office of Emergency Services, and you'll hear from Chris Riley, who will talk about some of the things that we've been doing even before the fires in Sonoma County. So again, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, and I also want to recognize Supervisor Sears, who's with us tonight, Supervisor Rice, who's watching over the camera, and Supervisor Connolly, who is in Washington, D.C., and watching as well. Really quickly, I'll introduce the panel, and then we'll get started. Christy Neal is Vegetation Management Wildland Fire Battalion Chief with Marin County Fire Department. Chief Tom Welch, representing Marin County Fire Chiefs Association. Chris Riley is the Director of the Office of Emergency Services. Rich Shortall is the President of Fire Safe Marin. Jim McCann is the City Manager of Mill Valley and representing the towns and cities here in the county. Jackie Graff is the police chief of Mill Valley, representing the Police Chiefs Association. Cindy Schaefer is with us representing State Parks. Charlotte Jourdain from the County Administrator's Office as our budget analyst also for County Fire. Jim Chaka with Marin County Open Space District. Jordan Reeser, the Fire Management Officer with the National Park Service. Don Lesser, an attorney and also an expert in the insurance industry. And Crystal Yesman with Marin Municipal Water District. Also like to recognize fire agencies in the room. Kyle Hamilton, Santa Fe Fire Department, Chief Mark Pomey, Kentfield Fire Department, Roger Meager, Ross Valley Fire Department, Chris Tubbs, Southern Marin Fire. I haven't seen any other fire chiefs. I see the Novato Police Chief also. Thank you all for being here tonight. This is an important community conversation, a little bit of background on the committee. The first steps were to inventory what we've done and what we're doing here in the county to prepare for a wildland fire. We brought in experts from Sonoma County, including Sonoma County Sheriff, Santa Rosa Police and Fire Chiefs, Sonoma Valley Fire Chief, CAL FIRE, the land management agencies from Sonoma County, and like we've done today, we were on your side asking them a lot of questions, what they learned from the events, how they could better prepare for an event like this, and how we learn from them. Tonight, we're gathering input and have continued to do that from the public. This is an important part of this committee. And the next step will be identifying the gaps or areas for improvement and growth here in this county. Ultimately, develop recommendations that Supervisors Arnold and Rodoni can bring back to the full board. I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge our wonderful volunteers, Carolyn and Marie, who are capturing all of this information for us to move forward. And Joan Limberski from Senator Levine's office is also with us tonight. So I think that's everything, and I know you did not come to hear me talk. We come to hear everyone else. So welcome, and we'll get started with the presentation. The way tonight's going to go, there'll be 4 presentations, essentially. Land management agencies, fire agencies, law enforcement, and Office of Emergency Services, followed by the insurance industry. Then we'll get into question and answer period. If you haven't already and you're interested in asking a question or have a comment, I ask that you fill these out. You can raise your hand if you need a card or a pen, or if you completed it, and we will bring these around to you. We'll collect them, and we'll make sure that the questions answered tonight, there's a variety, and we'll get as many panel members as we can to speak. So now we'll introduce and start the presentation with State Parks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. So I'm here representing State Parks, and I manage the Natural Resource Program for the Bay Area District of State Parks. Our district actually includes state parks in Marin County and Sonoma and Napa and other counties around the Bay Area. So we had 3 state parks that burned in the North Bay fires, Annandale, Sugarloaf Ridge, and Robert Louis Stevenson. So we're very invested in working with our Marin County partners to share lessons learned and to make sure that we can share the important things that we learned from what happened to our parks in those fires. In fact, many of the state park staff that responded to those fires would also respond to state parks in Marin County if we had fires in those parks. So we have 7 state parks in Marin County. There are 6 listed here. They total about 14,000 acres. I don't have Marconi Conference Center on Tomales Bay listed here. So along with participating in this subcommittee, we're taking a number of steps to help us all be better prepared in Marin County. We are conducting, at State Parks, we're conducting detailed after-action reviews of what happened in our Sonoma County state parks during the North Bay fires and how we can be better prepared in our Marin County state parks and the communities around them. We're looking at updating our wildfire management plans for all of our state parks, and we're continuing vegetation management work in all of our state parks in Marin County, which includes work to promote biodiversity that has fire resiliency benefits, like invasive species control and succession management, and then also targeted vegetation modification zones to protect communities in our parks. And finally, we're working on increasing outreach on the process for achieving defensible space on your own property if you live next to a state park. So we have this fact sheet that's at the table by the entrance that outlines that process if you live next to a state park. With that, I'll pass it on to Marin County Parks.
Good evening, everyone. Jim Chaka, Marin County Parks. I also sit on the board of Fire Safe Marin, and I want to acknowledge that our Director and General Manager, Max Corton, is here tonight, as well as our fire ecologist, Sarah Minnick. So the three of us are happy to answer questions after this event and during the Q&A session. Just a quick snapshot about our network. You know, we manage 34 different open space preserves throughout the county, and that encompasses 16,000 acres. We have 3,400 neighbors that we share property boundaries with, and you know, the safety of those properties are of utmost importance to us, and so we have a lot of strategies we've developed to help ensure the safety should there be a wildfire in any of those areas. Part of that plan is allocating money to do those projects. We have $2 million budgeted for 2018 just for vegetation management projects, and through that we're coordinating with all 14 fire departments throughout the county. And one of the ways that we're documenting our plan is through the Community Wildfire Prevention Plan. Ourselves, all the other land management agencies and the fire districts have all worked hard, and in 2016 finished a document that includes, you know, our projects as well as all the other land managers' projects. And so that's kind of a Marin-wide kind of global look at fire risk and prevention. In addition to that, we have another document that's on our website at marincountyparks.org that is our vegetation and biodiversity management plan, and that contains site-specific plans, project-specific plans for fire fuels reduction for this coming work year. So if people are curious about what's happening in your local preserve that you love or that you live near, that's a great resource, and you can also contact us to find out more. So, you know, we're managing all of our preserves for, you know, fuel reduction, for ecological benefits. But more importantly, we're also working directly with our neighbors and for concerned citizens on how to create defensible space on your property when it's adjacent to our preserves. One of the ways we're doing it is through establishing fuel breaks. Now, sometimes fuel breaks don't look like just clear-cut sections of land. There's some issues with that. We do create a lot of what's called shaded fuel breaks or wide area fuel breaks, which is removing all the vegetation that's ignitable in the understory to create better prevention of wildfire at that interface between private property and the wildlands. We're working through our road and trail management plan to help with fire road clearance and also surface road improvements to allow for fire departments to better respond to a fire. We're engaged with PG&E and other grant sources to deal with ignition prevention. We're also doing roadside mowing to prevent the risk of fire should there be a spark from a vehicle or for a cigarette or anything else like that. And then we also have this permit program that invites all of our neighbors to be able to do work if it's within 100 feet of their defensible space on Marin County Parks and open space property. So we have a letter that contains specific information on how we can work together if you want to do work within 100 feet of your homes. And all that information is on our website as well. So, Crystal? Yeah.
Hi, good evening. My name is Crystal Yesman. I'm a division manager with the Marin Municipal Water District, and I manage the watershed and also pipeline maintenance when there's a break or a leak in the street. But I want to focus tonight first off on the watershed, and we are the largest landowner on Mount Tam with over 20,000 acres. This is where your water comes from. 75% of the water from Marin it comes from Mount Tam. And along the borders of our lands, there's over 13,000 homes within 1 mile. So we manage over 1,000 acres of fuel breaks annually, and we constantly come back and mow and maintain those fuel breaks to help create a buffer between our lands and the neighborhoods in the wildland-urban interface. We have over 100 miles of fire roads for access for emergency response. And then also, we have some firefighting capabilities actually on staff. We have rangers that live within the watershed that are typically the first responders when a fire event happens, when there's an ignition. But I want to focus for a moment on some work that we're doing in the forest. And as you know, climate change and forest disease, coupled with fire regimes, has great and invasive species has increased the fire risk, especially in our forests. And the slide up at the top, you can see the dead and dying oaks that we find in the forest. So after years of sudden oak death, we've got this fuel load that's accumulated in our forest. Well, historically, back in the before the settlers came to California, there was fires every 4 to 5 years. And so the understory wasn't allowed to accumulate with such a great fuel load. And because of fire suppression, we've actually now find ourselves in a predicament, especially coupled with the sudden oak death. And so the tan oaks try to regrow, and then they die again. And so this creates a ladder fuel for the fires to cause what we call a stand replacement fire. So what we're doing now is some very innovative work with the U.S. Forest Service and UC Davis, coupled with Cal Poly and others to study going in and masticating that understory to return it to that natural state that we saw hundreds of years ago. And so this work is being conducted up along Bolinas Ridge. We've started working about 25 acres already. And you can see the difference that between what it looked like before and in the center slide at the bottom. It returns to that forest that John Muir talked about galloping through the forest. So we're really excited about this work. And we found that it reduces the fire risk greatly. And then also it's helping to improve habitat and also to promote carbon sequestration, because the trees that are there can increase in their diameter and do carbon sequestration. And then we're also looking at water yield. And we will hopefully be expanding this work in our area. So lastly, I just want to focus on what we're doing. You know, we're also a water district. And so our job is to provide water to fight the fires. And the Marin Municipal Water District has invested over $100 million in infrastructure investments to improve fire flow since the public voted for a fire flow fee. It's a parcel fee that started in 1996. And we continue to do that work. We are replacing our redwood tanks. Believe it or not, we still have 6 redwood tanks left in our system. And we're replacing those with fire-resistant concrete tanks. And then also, as part of our work, as I've mentioned previously, we do our fuels management, but we also engage in vegetation management. And we have a new vegetation management plan that's currently in an EIR process to help us expand some of that forestry work around on the watershed. New initiatives based on what we've learned from the fires up north is that we're working hand in hand with PG&E to make sure that their maintenance on their lines within the watershed are maintained. We just met with them this morning, and CPUC is now conducting a new audit of the North Bay Division for PG&E. Today, they're out there doing an audit of PG&E system. And then also, we recently entered into an agreement with Marin County Fire Department for their Tam fire crew to assist us with prescribed burns and vegetation removal. And lastly, I'll just end that we are increasing our investment in vegetation management to the tune of $400,000 more each year. And in this 2-year period of our budget, we'll be spending close to $3.5 million on veg management alone to help us maintain the watershed in the state and to reduce fire risk. I'll pass it on to the national parks.
Good evening. My name is Jordan Reeser. I'm the Fire Management Officer for the San Francisco Bay Area Parks, which include Point Reyes National Seashore, Golden Gate National Recreation Area, Muir Woods National Historic Site, and we're also responsible for fire management in a few other units in the area. Pinnacles, I'm not sure what's going on. I give it to the Fed to foul up the system. There we go. We're back on. Land managers clumped together here, which is a good thing because, as we know, fire really knows no boundaries, right? A 10,000 acre preserve, a 20,000 acre preserve, 5,000 acres, 8,000 acres, whatever it may be. Fire doesn't know those boundaries, right? So we're working collaboratively amongst ourselves to come up with a strategy and a long-term plan that is sustainable, that we can maintain and help protect our community. So Jason's going to flip the slides for me. I put the picture up here because working in Point Reyes in particular, we're reminded every day of the Vision Fire because we're working in the Vision Fire footprint, and that was the 1995 Vision Fire. There were some in this room who responded, I'm sure, and were there, and we lost a lot of homes, and we're lucky we didn't lose any lives that year, but the conditions that existed then up there are far worse now, and that's unfortunate, and we're starting to try to tackle that. So what we do, we're responsible for 100,000 acres within Marin County. And unfortunately, unlike the budgets of my cooperating agencies here, our budget has been going steadily the other way as it relates to fire management and fuels reduction. And that's more at the national level, it's not at the local level. It's just a more complex of a situation for us. Unfortunately, we don't have the control locally to, we're given a certain amount of dollars each year, and we have to figure out what we're going to do with them. We don't have much say in how much money comes to us. So we're kind of targeting some specific things, and really it's about improving our community evacuation routes. We have a lot of communities along heavily forested boundaries in southern Marin, in central Marin, and as well up through Inverness and West Marin in particular. And these goals of these areas is really to not only provide a good egress for the community members that might be living in those communities, access for fire equipment, but also kind of having them strategically based where firefighters can get in there and take some action. So really looking at it from a larger fire management perspective, where we're actually trying to use the limited resources we have to create a situation where if there is a fire, firefighters are going to be able to get in there and actually maybe take some actions in that area, which is a huge piece of it. So currently our project areas that we're really focusing on is in Inverness Ridge area, and that's primarily from the Vision Fire footprint that's occurred. And I don't know if many of you have been out there. You know, there's the Bishop Pine regenerated after the Vision Fire, really intense regeneration. Since then, the pine pitch canker, which spread its way south from San Luis Obispo and Cal Poly and the Monterey Pines, has infected the stand out there, and there's significant mortality in that regeneration and a significant fuel load. Unlike anything I've ever seen anywhere, just the spacing of it and the density of it, it's pretty phenomenal, and that's not a good word. And that phenomenal is not but it's mind-blowing. It really is. And we're doing the best we can really to help the community there, to create defensible space around their community, to really provide egress for them and allow fire equipment to get in there when we can. And we're also doing a lot of work and have been traditionally down in the Mill Valley area, primarily the southern Marin district, which includes Tam Valley, Homestead Valley, and into Tennessee Valley as well. And I put the little, so that might even be Chief Mizuko up there in that truck, I'm not sure. Just a picture that kind of a flashback to what the images were like that we were seeing coming out of, of the fires in North Bay and so many other places these days, that it happened here not that long ago. And I put the little historical fire returns. Those were studies that were done on Park Service properties, so mostly up on the Bolinas Ridge, the Inverness Ridge, and those were the different fire return intervals that they found through, dating of trees and whatnot of doing the fire scar. And you can see there's nothing over 33 years, and that basically, to us, is always that it's coming again, and it will happen again. And that's kind of always in the back of our mind as we're planning moving forward with this is these are events that will occur, have occurred, and we live in this fire environment, even though we're fortunate enough that the return intervals are such that this is long compared to a lot of forest types. So what we're doing, and there's just a quick glance, we have some pretty hands-on approaches. We use up some pretty large masticators to maintain some of our roadways and corridors around our communities. We do use prescribed fire, and pretty actively. The last couple of years during fire season, we've backed off a little because of smoke and other concerns. But we're still allowed to use prescribed fire, and traditionally the Point Reyes Seashore, burned upwards of 2,000 acres a year. A lot of Lima 1 corridor in cooperation with the Water District to help protect the watershed. And then we do a lot of, we have traditionally done a lot of eucalyptus thinning in the southern Marin area, but that's pretty labor intensive and cost intensive, and you can just see a few of the photos kind of what that involves. It's not going out there with a mower or a chainsaw and just cutting some stuff. It's pretty involved, and therefore the cost goes up significantly. And I think we're working really closely with Jason and the whole fire staff at Marin County and our cooperators, and we have agreements in place with Southern Marin as others to help us provide protection. And from the federal government side, we're doing everything we can to seek funds where they exist, because they do exist, and we're trying to really now streamline the process how we can actually utilize those on local lands as well as federal lands to protect the communities. Thanks.
Christine Marin County Fire. So We talked about earlier, you heard the Community Wildfire Protection Plan term, and that was adopted by the Board of Supervisors in 2016. Basically, it's in terms of preparedness, we're looking beyond operational readiness and response, and we're looking at how Marin County looks in terms of fire risk, hazard, and values. And so the CWPP identifies our risk, hazard, and values across the whole county. It identifies a number of areas of concern that the fire agencies and land management agencies have concerns about. Each agency, as a result of that CWPP, has put together some action plans and a program of work at an agency level. There are 5 goals of the Community Wildfire Protection Plan, and there's a slew of recommendations in that plan as well. But the 5 goals are really, we want to continue to identify and evaluate the fire hazard. We want to continue to promote land use planning as it relates to fire hazard and fire risk. Collaborate on the development and implementation of wildfire protection plans. We want to integrate our fire hazard reduction work amongst all the agencies, and we want to increase the awareness of the public on actions that individuals and communities can take to reduce their loss from wildfire. And that document is on the firesafemarin.org website. It's a large document. You can download that and look at the recommendations. So part of that plan talks about where our people are. It identifies where the people are as it relates to where our extreme fire hazard conditions are. So this map basically represents where we have very high flame lengths, very high rates of spread on top of where the people are. So obviously that helps us prioritize where we want to do work and focus our programs.
Hello, everybody. Tom Welch, Mill Valley Fire Department, representing the Marin County Fire Chiefs Association today. The CWPP also looks and takes into account 4 aspects, what we use in the fire service, the 4 E's, if you will: education, enforcement, engineering, and the 4th E that's not listed up there is emergency response. But I can assure you that our emergency response is extremely robust. The CWP focuses on vegetation management, which would fall under engineering practices, looks at ridgetop fuel breaks, wide area fuel breaks, partners with the Marin County Open Space and the Water District on various projects. And some other engineering items might be evacuation routes. The county fire code is a portion that falls under enforcement. And under the fire code, we drive programs such as seasonal defensible space programs, fire code enforcement through vegetation management programs. If you are seeking entitlement through a building permit, you might be required to submit a vegetation management program around your structure. Structural ignitability is a major focus of the CWPP, and so that's, and also WUI hardening, so hardening of your home so that it can withstand. So we work with the vegetation works directly with the home. Community defense, we want to work with homeowners. We want homeowners to function and form into neighborhood groups to address various issues like evacuation planning within your neighborhood. We want to work, those neighborhood groups, to also work with our open space partners. We want to come after vacant lots and those landowners that are not following regulation, create defensible space. The final 2 bullets here are a Ready, Set, Go program. If you haven't looked at the Ready, Set, Go program and gotten yourself informed on the elements of it, I suggest that you do. And then Firewise USA, which is a program where right now there are about 11 or so Firewise communities. These are neighborhoods that have formed together, and they are they're working together to protect their neighborhood against wildland fire. I've heard Chief Weber say multiple times that maybe we should make the entire county Firewise, which I think is an admirable goal.
Okay.
On to the next one here. So preparedness, the high priority work. Evacuation routes. Your communities are focused on evacuation routes constantly. And how they do that is by managing the vegetation in and around your evacuations, as we heard from the land managers. Cutting fuels back, that enhances our access into the problem, but it also enhances your egress from the problem. Here again, we're going to talk about Alert Marin, which is a communication thing, and I won't steal any of Chris's thunder. Defensible space, we need to make sure that your homes can be defended by themselves, should fire department not be there to do that. We want to increase public awareness, and Chief Weber, the Board of Supervisors, and various communities are doing that right now. You are becoming the educated ones, and we challenge you to reach out to your neighbors and friends to educate them. High priority work also includes absentee property owners, fire hazard reduction, using different strategies throughout place fire hazard reduction projects to break up landscapes. So what we're looking to do is break up the continuity of the vegetation in and around your home, interrupt the laddering of fuels. A fire can oftentimes run along grass, ladder into brush, and then next thing you know, it can be in the crown. So we want to work providing practices to reduce that. And then structural reliability is another key aspect and high priority for the CWPP.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about defensible space inspections. Many of the departments have at least a couple inspectors, whether it's a fire marshal, a fire inspector, or seasonal firefighters that perform defensible space inspections throughout the fire season. So in West Marin, for example, County Fire, we've got anywhere from 2 to 6 seasonal firefighters who do defensible space inspections in the west part of Marin. So as many, I think countywide, we're probably doing probably 8,000 inspections a year with all the departments added up. We're out there working with you to educate you on what you can do to defend your home and create that defensible space. One of the other things we're annually doing is the annual Green Waste Days. If you live in West Marin, there's a partnership between the county and West Marin Compost, so people who are doing their fire hazard reduction on their land and property can take that debris. These 2 weekends in 2018, June and July, you can dump off that material for free in Nicasio, and so we'll continue with that program. We have the Tam Fire Crew, which works for the land management agencies. We kind of contract out basically for the Water District, for Parks and Open Space, for the National Park Service, where we've got a 13-person fire crew that goes out, cuts brush, does defensible space along large land agency lands on the border, basically, so that communities can have protection. So we're doing work for the land management agencies and some large private landowners as well. And we're looking to expand that crew program to partner with the National Park Service and hopefully have another 10-person module that would focus a lot on the National Park Service lands. So that's in the works. Marin County Fire Chiefs.
County Fire Chiefs. So the Marin County Fire Chiefs include all the jurisdictions. They have membership at the county chiefs. There are several goals that the fire chiefs have and are working on. A couple of those is to improve our data collection through records management systems, and also work with our dispatch services through computer-aided dispatch. A fire investigation team is a major focus of ours, and if we don't have a solid investigation team, it's very challenging to understand the entirety of the problem and to solve problems should we have them. Medical mutual aid is another one. Automatic vehicle locating. These are all things that produce a more seamless response to emergency. And then this is a big one right here: fire prevention, communication, education, and partnering with Fire Safe Marin. One of the focuses we have is to ensure that all of the communities are saying the same message. The CWPP offers that backdrop. It's a science-based approach that offers a consistent platform for us to be able to communicate from. But the fire chiefs want to ensure that you're not getting conflicting information depending on where you live. Evacuation. There we go. Okay, so evacuations. This is a topic that you're all concerned about, we're all concerned about, for sure. I just want to give you a little bit of behind-the-curtain approach. Public safety operates in a unified command during these types of incidences. So the police department, the fire department, public works in your community are all going to be a part of the unified command approach when it comes time to make decisions for evacuation. During that decision process, routes are identified and communicated out through a number of means, which Chris Riley will talk about. The fire department works with law enforcement to make the decision. Law enforcement is one of the primary movers and shakers on evacuation. Fire department obviously will assist as needed. And then the Office of Emergency Services, they play a heavy role in the notification piece.
Talked a little bit about firewise. Basically, all the departments are encouraging communities, HOAs, neighborhood groups, anybody to basically start to work through a firewise recognition process. We talked about there's about 11 firewise communities in Marin County currently, and our partnership with FireSafe Marin is a way to bring communities together and work on your defensible space, a variety of items related to your community, specific to your community, and Firewise is a process that we can guide you through. So with that, it transitions right into FireSafe Marin is our county-wide FireSafe Council. It's a nonprofit, and the role of FireSafe Marin is really to work with communities. It's dedicated to reducing the hazards and improving safety awareness for the public. There are 16 members on the board. Our current president is Rich Shorthall up here. Basically, the group meets every month on the second Friday of the month and has been established since 1992. And so that group, the board, is a mix of land management agencies, fire departments, public entities, utility districts, public HOAs, a variety of people. So it's an open public group. The meetings are open and to the public, and so if you're interested in FireSafe Marin and some of the things that they do, firesafemarin.org, we have a table out front as well. Some of the things that FireSafe Marin's done just in this last year, sponsored and worked with communities on hosting 20 chipper days. We have a very excellent relationship with PG&E, and they provide as much as $100,000 the last 2 years to work on projects that reduce the fire hazard or risk to PG&E infrastructure. And so a lot of our focus has been on working on some of that vegetation that's encroaching evacuation routes in Ville Valley, Corte Madera, Larkspur, Tam Valley, and then we're right now starting to put together a list of projects for this next year. And then a couple of state grants. FireSafe Marin manages grants, and so the last couple years we've brought in about $1.2 million in state grants funded by the SRA fund, and so we're a source for homeowners associations to work with, and basically, the efforts over the last year have involved hundreds, thousands of hours of volunteer hours, and all the land management agencies, fire agencies, and utility companies are all working together. So it's a good effort, and we hope you can join us. We've talked a lot about Firewise communities. There is a process in which FireSafe Marin can help guide you as neighborhoods, homeowners associations, road groups, however you want to organize. There's a process to go through to get national recognition. Although you don't have to be Firewise to be Firewise, we can do all these things without going through this. You can still do your defensible space, work on your structure, reducing your structural ignitability, and so we want to work with you. And more neighborhoods are coming online to be Firewise through the national program. So we're looking forward to working with you all. Thanks.
I'm just going to go off script for just 1 second. Chief Weber's probably anyway.
We'll keep it on track.
It's very important to understand that this is a community problem, that fire is a community problem, and that the entire government, all the branches of the government, will be brought to bear in servicing and serving you, the building officials, planners, building, public works, law enforcement. Everybody will be together to assist, but there are responsibilities that you have as well. So I encourage you to get informed on those responsibilities.
Good evening, Chris Riley, Sheriff's Emergency Services. So I'm going to talk to you today briefly about evacuations a little bit more. I know a lot of that's been covered by the chief, but I just have a couple other things that I'll add. And then I want to spend a little bit more time on alert and warning, which is one of our main responsibilities in the Office of Emergency Services. So I'm going to talk to you about what we know now, how we practice, during a fire, how we operate, and then talk about some of the lessons learned from our partners up in the Sonoma and Napa when they came down, and then briefly talk to you about some of the initiatives that we have going forward, some of the things that we want to improve. So first of all, evacuations, just quickly, I'll mention again, it's unified command, so that's law and fire working together. And when they're managing an incident, they're deciding, which areas have priority in terms of, fire response. And then for evacuation, that's about what areas need to be evacuated, how we're going to move the people out, so that's what the route is, what's the message that we're going to send out ultimately through our systems, and then where we want people to end up, and then, of course, update people. So that's all decided by unified command. So a couple of things I want to highlight. There's been some changes. A lot of you are used to hearing voluntary evacuations, mandatory evacuations. We don't use those terms anymore. So the terms that we use are when there's a potentially threatened area, we use the term evacuation order. Evacuation warning. So that's the message that you'll hear when we start communicating with you through our systems. So when you must immediately evacuate an area, then that's an evacuation order. So that's the term that you're going to hear us use when it's really time to get out. Finally, what are some of the other things that we're doing, meanwhile when we're making these decisions about evacuations? The Unified Command is going to identify safe refuge areas. So in the potential situation where you can't get outside of an evacuation area, we identify areas that will be safe for you to stage in, to move through when you're evacuating. A couple of things that we also do is we always identify areas of special needs populations, so that's people with access and functional needs. That, as it turns out, and a lot of you probably heard about it in the media, that was a big issue in the North Bay fires. The elderly, people in wheelchairs, their special needs, it's difficult. So in emergency management, we're always thinking about the needs of that community and how we can help them. We also think about large animals. That was a big issue, of course, in Sonoma and Napa. There's a lot of that. There's also a lot in this county, too. So we definitely want to address that when we're thinking evacuations. Finally, as the chief mentioned, it's our responsibility, the Office of Emergency Services, primarily, to send those messages out to you, to the people in the community, when it's time to leave. Okay, so some of the things that we do now with evacuations, we do have plans and procedures for evacuations, and we try to update these as often as possible. We also, law enforcement and fire, participate regularly in drills. Many of you may have even participated in those yourself. The City of Mill Valley annually has a drill. The Office of Emergency Services recently partnered with many other stakeholders in a evacuation drill in Ross Valley, and there's many others going on too. So that's one of the things we do, just to stay current on the procedures for evacuation. We do this in partnership with many agencies, all the law agencies in this county, all the fire agencies in this county, so that we can continue to work closely together when we're conducting an evacuation. So now, what have we learned? Lessons learned from the North Bay fires. One of the things that was obvious was it's important to evacuate early. When the message goes out from us, when the determination is made through Unified Command, That's the time to leave. That's not the time to start looking around the house and getting your stuff together. Hopefully you've been through the Ready, Set, Go program. You have a kit all made up. You know where your important papers are. You grab all that and you go. That means go now. As soon as we tell you it's time to go. One of the things that we learned also is that it's really important to provide clear messages. So that's us to you, telling you exactly what's going on, the route to take, where we want you to go, you know, and to stand by for further direction. So it's really important to get a clear message out. Again, it's important for us to consider those people with access and functional needs, so we always do that now. One of the things that we've noticed that we need to work on, and we're doing that right now, is revising our plans. So the Sheriff's Office, in conjunction with all of the law agencies in the county, have evacuation plans. So we're actually right in the middle of revising and refreshing those plans. And then the next step will be to practice them, of course. So we'll continue with those drills, we'll continue with those exercises, and we'll continue to keep those plans up to date. So that's basically it for evacuation. I'll move on now to alert and warning, which, one more thing. This is a really good slide. I'll just mention this really quick. This is something that the fire agencies have had for a long time, is mutual threat zones, and as part of that plan, they've identified areas and created maps for particular areas that may need to be evacuated in the event of a fire. And so what this provides us is we actually have these maps in our alert system so that an incident commander can tell us it's this area, we can quickly go to that area and then notify that area that it's time to evacuate. The maps also have evacuation routes, so once it's determined which is the safe route to evacuate, then we notify all the people in that area, take this route and go to the shelter. So that's a really good tool for us to have. Okay, alert and warning. So this is, I'll tell you what we know right now. We have many systems that we can use to send out alerts and warnings to the community. And it's good that we have multiple tools because we always pick the right one that we need to use. Our primary tool is Alert Marin. Hopefully all of you have registered through alertmarin.org, created a profile there, given us your mobile phone number and your email so that we can communicate with you. But that's not the only tool we have. There's also the emergency alert system, which I'm sure most of you know what that is. That's the banner that interrupts your favorite TV show, you know, and tells you this is a test. It also sends out messages over the radio, too, and that's been around a long, long time. There's other systems, one that you've been hearing a lot about in the news, and that's the wireless emergency alert, also known as Amber Alerts. So we also have that capability to send out those alerts, too, countywide. So we have that. There's also another system called Nixle. Probably a lot of you have opted into that or just texted your phone number to Nixle in order to get messages through that platform, too. And then there's some old-fashioned systems that we still have in place. There are some areas in the county that have sirens and horns, and we can use those in the event that they are an advantage for alerting people of an emergency that's in their neighborhood. And then finally, there's always the old-fashioned method, and that is police officers driving their cars through the neighborhood on a loudspeaker and telling you it's time to go. They actually did a lot of that up in Sonoma and Napa. There's many other ways that we can get messages out, and I know a lot of you rely on it. And social media now, you know, with the advent of Twitter and Nextdoor and Instagram and all the rest of those. We use those, but we try not to rely on those for emergency alerting. We primarily like to get, you know, all the options that we can through our Alert Marin so that we can notify you directly. Can't always rely on Twitter, and a lot of times there's a lot of rumors that go back and forth on Twitter. So we don't rely on that completely. So we have policies, procedures, and ongoing testing in place for all of these systems to make sure that we're ready to send out those warnings when we need to. So what are some lessons that we learned about alert and warning? Again, evacuating early is hugely important. Again, using the right system, too. I know a lot of you have read about, you know, wireless emergency alerts. Why aren't they used? As opposed to sending, phone calls to your home. And that's all decided by, again, unified command. What's the best way to send the message out? And what's the best platform to use? Some of the things that we're working on, of course, another lesson learned is the clear messaging. I already mentioned that. Sometimes you need to make sure that you may have to send it out in other languages, so you need to be able to do that, be ready to do that. And we continue to revise our plans, much like we do with the evacuation plans, too. And we'll continue practicing using those platforms so that we're ready to use them. So real quickly, a couple of things that are also on the forefront that we're working with a few of our partners on. So particularly about wireless emergency alerts. I know a lot of people have a lot of questions about that. So a few things. The wireless emergency alerts, also known as Amber Alerts, is a federal program. So it's managed by the FCC, FEMA. They're actually proposing many really good changes to that system. They're going to increase the character limit, which allows us as message originators to provide more information to you, those receiving the messages. So they're proposing adding more character fields so that we can go from 90 characters to 360 characters. So that'll be helpful because we can tell you specifically, what we're trying to get you to do, what route to take. Another thing that they're considering doing is changing the system so that we can send links to websites. And that could be a website where we post all of where our shelters are, so you know where to go and how to get there, maybe even a map, or even a phone number to contact, 211 or some other agency to provide you some more information. The next one is a really big issue, and actually the FCC has been working on this, and FEMA have been working on this for a long time, to try and improve the geographic targeting of WIAs. I won't get into all the technology, but basically they work off of cell phone technology and off of cell phone towers. And it's not perfect, and they're trying to target it a little bit more finely. So that would help us as message originators too. They're going to create a new class of messages for us so that we can send out all types for floods, for fires, whatever we need to do. Broadcast in Spanish, and then of course more information on testing and use of the system. So these are all good changes for us. Finally, really quickly, many of you have probably heard about Senate Bill 833 that's proposed, and it's working its way through the process. And the idea here is that it's going to establish a statewide system called Red Alerts, and it's basically on the backbone of wireless emergency alerts. It's still in formation. It hasn't passed yet, and there's some issues to work out. But the idea is to make a more robust wireless emergency alert system, mandate that all government agencies have the ability to send those messages out. Of course, with that issue, it would come funding, so that all has to be worked out. And then to provide a little bit more training, a little bit more support from the state. So that's on the way. That's definitely in direct response to some of the lessons learned in the North Bay fires. Quickly, I'm running out of time, but we're going to continue to improve our emergency operations center. Sheltering was a really big issue that we learned. Of course, all of you know that we ran a shelter here, and there's a lot of lessons learned from that. So we're going to continue to work on that, improve those operations. And then finally, there were 3 other big issues. Donations management. We need to work on emergency procurement. That's basically buying stuff that we need to help you. And then finally, recovery is a really big issue that can go on for years. And so we're going to continue working on that to get us all back to normal after a big fire. And I think that's it. Thank you.
You got the clicker, Don. Sorry, did I go over the clicker?
Yep, we're good. Hi, I'm Don Lesser. I'm a lawyer here in San Rafael, and my firm represents insurance policyholders in helping them recover what they're entitled to from their insurance companies when their insurance companies don't do what they're supposed to do. We also advise our business clients primarily on helping them make sure they have the right kinds of insurance for their businesses and that they're adequately prepared. And that's really what I'm here to talk about tonight, is how insurance is a major, in fact, critical part of disaster preparedness. Who wants to know what 74% is? 74% is the percentage of Santa Rosa fire victims who didn't have enough insurance to rebuild their homes. 74%. Think about that. That means that 74% of those people may not be able to rebuild their homes where their home was located. 74% means those people are going to have to, if they want to rebuild where they lived, have to come up with money out of their own pockets, sometimes tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to rebuild. There are some people who have come to us from Sonoma and Napa County who are looking at perhaps having to come up with over $1 million to rebuild. Why does this happen? Here's why this happens. It happens because, contrary to popular belief, it's not, under California law, it's not the insurance company's job or your insurance agent's job to tell you how much insurance you need to rebuild your home. Under California law, that's on you as the policyholder. And so what typically happens when people go to buy their homeowner's insurance is they call their insurance company, they call an agent, and they say, I want to buy homeowner's insurance. And whoever they're talking to says, how much insurance do you want to buy? And your likely response to that is, well, I don't know, how much do I need? It is very, very difficult to get a straight answer to that question out of anybody on the other end of the phone. Why? Because the insurance industry doesn't want the legal responsibility of providing you that advice. To some extent, that's understandable because you, in one sense, you know a lot better than anyone else what your home is worth and what it's going to cost to rebuild. But as a practical matter, you really don't unless you go and get some advice. And what you're really looking for out of that insurance policy is enough that allows you to rebuild and rebuild the home that you had before the fire happened. You're also looking for enough to be able to replace all your personal items that are lost, including valuable things like jewelry, silver, stamp and coin collections, and other things that typically have very low limits under most insurance policies unless you buy more. So it's really on you when you're buying your insurance and every year when you renew that insurance to make sure that you've got enough. What is enough? Well, what you want to tell that insurance agent or the insurance company that you're talking to is you want full replacement cost coverage. How do you know what that is? Well, there are a few ways to find out. There are, believe it or not, people who make a living out of providing that sort of advice. You can find them on the internet. They're actually certified, and they can come out much like an appraiser would, although it's a different analysis. But they will come out and tell you, based on data regarding costs, labor costs and materials costs and the other relevant factors, how much it's likely to cost if your home burns down or if your home is damaged and what it's likely to cost. Usually it's done on a per square foot basis. How much it's going to cost to rebuild. And that's your starting point. When you look at your insurance policy and it says coverage A and there's an amount there that for your home, that's the number, that's the first number that you want. You want to find out what that number is, your replacement cost. There are a number of other ways to get that information. There are now some some websites and online apps that will allow you to punch in information about your home and get a cost of rebuilding estimate. You can also ask a contractor, ask a good, reputable local contractor how much it's likely to cost. Be skeptical about any estimate that is much lower than $300 a square foot. particularly in Marin County. We have clients in Sonoma and Napa who were told by their contractors that they were looking at $400 a square foot, sometimes more. So anything in this area less than $300 a square foot is probably a good starting point, and in many cases that's probably not enough. Now, as I said, there are two pieces to determining how much your insurance policy is going to pay you to rebuild your home. The first is that replacement cost coverage number that's on your declaration sheet on your insurance policy. But then you can also buy through an endorsement what's called additional replacement cost coverage, and it's usually expressed as a percentage of the first number. So you can buy 10% more, 25% more. Some carriers will offer you up to 50% more. Why do you want that? Even if you think you've got a good baseline number, here's why. When you have a firestorm like what happened in the North Bay, guess what happens to labor rates and contractors' rates? We had, we've heard from people who were being told that they were looking at $500 or $600 a square foot just because there aren't enough contractors to do the work. Now, what ultimately happens as a practical matter is many of the large insurance companies make deals with contractors where the contractors agree to rebuild homes at a lower rate than that because they get referred by the insurance company to do the work. But you're still looking at, under a variety of circumstances, potential cost of rebuilding that is going to be more than even that $300 or $350 per square foot baseline. So what we tell people is buy as much as you can afford in terms of that endorsement for additional replacement cost coverage. There's another piece to it as well. Unless you buy an endorsement that provides it, your insurance policy will generally not cover the part of your rebuilding cost that is created by the fact that you've got to comply with new building codes that weren't in existence when your home was built. This is called code upgrade coverage. It's a gotta have. And you can buy various percentages. You can buy 10% more, 20% more, 25% more. That's another piece that you that you definitely need to get because unless your home was built yesterday, I can almost guarantee you that there are going to be code requirements when your house is damaged that didn't exist when you bought it or when it was built. Let's talk about your personal items for a minute, and I mentioned this briefly. Jewelry, collections, silverware, those kinds of things typically have very low limits on your basic form policy. And so if you've got any significant amount of those items, check your policy, and what you can do is you can pay to have your more valuable items scheduled. They're listed on your policy, and then they're scheduled for a particular amount. And usually what you do is you get them appraised or you provide the receipt from having bought those items, and then those items will be scheduled on your policy, and you're assured of being paid that amount if those items are lost or destroyed. The other key problem that a lot of folks up in the North Bay are having, and this again is a very typical problem in wildfire and other kinds of mass disaster situations, which is your policy provides you what are called additional living expenses. If you have to move out, if you have to find temporary living.
Can't hear you.
Yeah. If you have to move out, if you have to get a temporary place to live, this coverage provides payment for those costs, and it's usually defined by a period of time or an amount. You want to make sure when you buy your coverage or when you're renewing it that you've got enough coverage to carry you, we recommend, for at least 2 years. The folks up in Sonoma and Napa are being told that it may well be more than 2 years before their homes are rebuilt, even if they're able to rebuild them. It's taken, 6 months just to get the sites cleared. And you can imagine the burden on the building, on the county officials who are going to be dealing with permit applications and all of the other things that are involved in rebuilding. 2 years, I think for a lot of these folks, they're going to be lucky if they can get it done in 2 years. So, another key number for you: $100 to $300 a year. That's on average what good coverage, the kind of coverage that I'm talking about, will cost you. What is that? That's like less than $1 a day. Okay. Homeowners insurance is not one of those things you want to scrimp on. It literally is one of those things where you get what you pay for. And, let's face it, nobody wants to spend money on insurance. It's boring. It's not something pretty that you can look at or fun to have. But, if you are in a situation where your home burns down, FEMA is not going to help you. I mean, there's a few tens of thousands of dollars that FEMA is able to provide you if you don't have insurance and don't have the wherewithal to pay. So the rebuilding of these communities really is funded almost entirely by the insurance that the homeowners and the businesses carry. A few don'ts. Don't be penny wise. When you apply for your insurance, or when the insurance company asks you how big your house is, or about the amenities, don't underestimate. A lot of people do because they think they're going to save money. Bad trade-off. Also, don't rely on the purchase price or the appraised value of your home. Very often, the replacement cost is going to be higher than that. So you really do need to drill down on that cost of replacement number. Also, don't wait until after you've had a loss to get appraisals of that personal property. If you've got a $20,000 wedding ring, get it appraised now and get it scheduled on your policy now. Don't wait. If you need to save money, the best way to save money on your insurance is to get one with a higher deductible. That will save you significant money. And for most people, you're better off treating your insurance policy as insurance against catastrophe, not against smaller things that aren't that aren't life and death for you. Another key: document your conversations with your insurance agent and with your insurance company. On that phone call you have with them, where you tell them, I want full replacement cost coverage. Here's what I want. Here's what my house is going to cost to rebuild. That's what I want. Document those conversations. How? Well, you can do it in a couple of different ways. You can send them an email if you can get an email address. But short of that, just make notes. Date them and save them on your computer and save them up in the cloud so that so that the only copy you have is non-site. Last, just a couple of quick resources. These are links to really valuable resources that all of you can use. First, I want to give a shout out to a great organization called United Policyholders, which, if you haven't heard about it, is a terrific organization that was formed after the Oakland Hills fire. They have a terrific website with a lot of great resources and a lot of great suggestions. They also have an app that you can download onto your phone that will allow you relatively painlessly to do an inventory of your personal property, so that when the fire or other thing does happen, you've got those records that the insurance company is going to ask you for. The second one, e2value.com, is one of the online resources that you can use to get an estimate of your cost of rebuilding. And the last is a link to the California Department of Insurance, which also has some helpful information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dawn. Now, our job is to keep you from having to deal with that insurance loss. So that's where a lot of these questions will be centered on. And again, I appreciate everybody's patience. This was a lot to put in front of you tonight, but I think especially with the insurance piece, it's something that hasn't been talked a lot about publicly, and we felt it was very important. Thank you to the supervisors for reaching out to Dawn and having him here, because it was certainly something I learned a lot from. We'll get into the questions, and I'm going to paraphrase some of these because they're similar, and then ask the members of the panel. My neighbors have a lot of dead trees on their property. I'm concerned for my property. How do I go about having the trees removed? And does the city or county offer any solutions? And I'm going to pass this to Christy Neo, who spends a lot of time dealing with this.
So dead trees, if they're within the 100-foot defensible space zone, then we can sort of help you. Otherwise, if they're outside of that and on their large piece of property, basically we have no ability to tell them to remove them. But if they're dead and within the 100-foot defensible space zone, your fire department representative can come out and do an inspection and document that.
And that's 100 feet from your residence. And next question, I'll direct to the city manager, Jim McCann. What are towns and cities and counties doing to maintain fire hazards in areas where adjacent land is publicly owned, towns, city, counties? And I think Mill Valley is an excellent example of somebody that's partnered with the Public Land Management Agency.
Sure. Thank you very much. I'm Jim McCann. I'm the city manager in Mill Valley. And I was asked to sit on the panel to really represent the city managers from the 11 cities in Marin County. We all have boundaries. Some of us have boundaries that are adjacent to wildland areas, and so that urban wildland interface is something that's critically important. And we have very good partnerships with the land management agencies, many of whom you've heard from tonight. And that's a cooperative relationship where we look at vegetation management, evacuation, access, and really how to work together to prevent fires, but also to prevent the spread of fires. In our particular case, we're at the base of Mount Tam. We work very well with the Open Space District as well as the Water District and other agencies to work regularly each year to inspect the areas around us, to maintain fuel breaks, and to look at relationships between that adjacent property and private property or public property in the city of Mill Valley. I know other cities have similar relationships with their open space areas. It really is an ongoing relationship to ensure that we've got coordination so that the funds that are available, whether it's city funds or other public funds, are used wisely. We do a lot of partnerships, so instead of us hiring a contractor and an agency hiring a contractor, we may hire the same contractor. We'll bring our own crews to work together with agency crews so we can really make a more efficient use of those funds. Today, with all of the attention on the issue, we're really redoubling our efforts, and we're working very, very cooperatively to identify the areas that really need attention. There are different areas that have different exposures based on topography, geography, wind pattern, all of those things. And so not everything is equal. Some areas are much more sensitive, and we really focus our resources on those areas. And there are very active conversations going on right now with a number of folks up here about what can we do to enhance the situation that we have. How can we prevent a wildfire, and once one occurs, and we're sure that one will occur, how do we quickly cooperate, and how do we quickly jump on top of it? Part of it for sure is the reduction of fuels, and so there are a lot of issues around that. So one person's wonderfully managed fuel break is another person's eyesore. How one goes about removing vegetation is sensitive. There are environmental issues that are related to it, but I think everybody appreciates the very significant importance of reducing fuels, and there's a trade-off. So there's an aesthetic trade-off, there's an environmental trade-off, but the bottom line is safety, so safety to individuals, saving lives, and then also protecting the environment. So it's a compromise, and it's a very serious issue that I know that everybody up here wrestles with. But it really is, when it comes down to it, it's a cooperative effort. We're in it together. We've got a beautiful environment. We've got a lot of hazards, and so it's recognizing those hazards, and then I think developing a set of priorities so that we can go after them and retain the things that are important to us and protect the environment and protect lives.
Thank you, Jim. Next question to our land management agencies. Can sheep and goats be utilized to control weeds on a more frequent basis? Used to see more of this, and maybe if our land management teams can answer, Jim.
Sure. So I referenced this document earlier, the Vegetation and Biodiversity Management Plan. Sheep grazing, goat grazing is one of the tools we use for reducing fire. It's, right now we've just developed an exciting project with the Sleepy Hollow Fire Protection District. There's a lot of grazing happening in Terra Linda, Sleepy Hollow. We've used that same strategy in King Mountain and in other areas, so I don't have the exact dollar figure at my fingertips, what we've allocated to it, but it is one of the strategies. And, and I'll just list the others just so people realize that, there's a lot of mechanical removal, which is hand crews going out there doing hand pulling of weeds, trimming understory, taking out diseased and down trees, grazing, and other strategies, partnering with the communities to take care of dead fuels.
And the last part of it is, I think it's still being used quite a bit, and more since I've been the fire chief in 6 years. So I think it just depends on where you're seeing it in the county. Next question, a very important one, and I know certainly the Board of Supervisors has taken this up as a policy issue for the coming year. And how do we best prepare our aging population as we encourage aging in place? Many older adults are not tuned into technology to get notifications. So I asked Chief Welch and Chris Riley from the Sheriff's Office to address that.
Yeah, good question. There's a lot of good programs out there for the citizens that are in that situation. So, I encourage you to go to the Ready Marin, and learn about personal preparedness for you and for your family. It covers a lot of those issues. CERT training is another one. And really the best answer is get to know your neighbors. Become prepared as a neighborhood, as a street, as a block. That's really, in the end, that's the best way to prepare in that situation so that you can help each other. Emergency services are going to be overwhelmed for the first few hours, probably the first few days. So it's incumbent upon yourself to be personally prepared. And then, those emergency services can get to you when they're available. In terms of technology, I think was the second part of that question.
I think the fact that an aging population may not have their cell phone next to them in bed, as some of the teenagers do.
Yeah, right, on it all the time. That's true. So just so you know, our system, Alert Marin, has, if you have an AT&T or a Verizon home phone, we have your number because we buy that data and we put it in our system. We encourage people to sign up and create a platform. We want you to continue to do that, create an account so that we can get your email, so we can get your mobile phone if you do have those and you use those regularly. But just so you know, you don't have to do anything because we do have your number in there. We buy those numbers. We also put numbers in from the white pages and the yellow pages. We get all that data and put it in there. And just recently we found out that, and we're working on this, it's not the case right now, but we found out that we can buy the data from Comcast, so people that have a internet phone too. So we'll be able to put those numbers in there. So that part of it, you can still get a message, you can still get a warning from us if you have those regular phone lines. So.
Why do you have to buy it? That's a great expense to the...
It's actually not that expensive. It's only like $1,200 a year.
And if you have questions, let's get them on a card just so we don't have too much back and forth, but I appreciate it.
So, Chief, you have anything else to add?
Please stop telling people to go to websites when the fires break out or earth moves. We, or the public, should already know what is on those sites. We need to be taught. So the question here I'm going to direct to Chris Riley, and specifically the Get Ready program, which is important for everyone in this room and everyone in our community to engage in. It's a quick way to prepare yourself, Chris.
Yeah, Chief is right. The Get Ready program is really great. I mean, it teaches you personal preparedness, family preparedness, preparedness, everything. So that's the secret, really. Learn how to take care of yourself, for the first several hours, for the first several days. That's the best thing to do. In terms of us referring you to websites, I understand that. But what we do, again, is we try to contact everyone on very many paths, so a lot of different ways. That's the key to our systems that we use. So we try to ring your phone. If you register on Alert Marin, we're going to send you an email. We're going to text your mobile phone numbers. We have the emergency alert system, so we're going to give you information on your TV, on your radio. We have access to wireless emergency alerts, so if you do have a mobile phone, we're going to send messages to your mobile phone. So I understand not everybody's into technology. That's fine. We understand that too. So we try to get the message to you as many ways as we can.
Thanks, Chris. And moving forward here to the Water District, a specific question about firefighting resources and why they have them, I think, is the question, and why the number of rangers have been reduced in the contract with the Sheriff's Office. So I'll ask Crystal to answer that.
Yes, actually, our staff is typically first on scene for fires in the watershed, and that's evident from even last year. So it's essential that we're there. We do have, while we only have 5 full-time rangers on staff, we also supplement that with a couple of contract deputies from the Sheriff's Office and ranger aides. In total, with the chief, there's 10 in our ranger staff. And we have a boat that we put out on the lakes. It has a fire pump. Oftentimes, these fires are hard to get to in remote areas, and so we will transport fire personnel and communicate with the Unified Command on directing other agencies where to go in terms of fighting the fire.
I'll also add that the Water District helped us out during the fire siege of the North Bays. We were able to put almost 40 fire engines on the road, and the reason was the collaboration between agencies. And the Water District staffed their Type 6 engines, which are more of your pickup truck with a pump, and let us use their fire engine to staff one of our stations and protect the county. And then the bulldozer was staffed by one of our operators. So again, there's a lot of collaboration back and forth. There's important resources, certainly from my perspective.
I'll also add that we also use our firefighting personnel to manage our pile burns. Every year around this time of year, we've accumulated piles on the mountain, and we that's one of our methods for vegetation management. So we have staff with the fire truck situated right at the pile burn just to make sure everything's under control.
And also, Jason, our law enforcement contract with the Water District remains the same. It's not been cut back. It's 2 deputy sheriffs assigned to the Water District.
Thank you. And to open space, our home's back up to open space. Is Marin Open Space responsible for clearing fallen and dead trees that are in close proximity to homes and streets?
Okay, thanks. Again, Jim Chaka, Marin County Parks. 2 things to that. So first is, it's sort of a case-by-case evaluation. It's the homeowner's responsibility to clear vegetation within 100 feet of your property. So when I hear something that's in proximity to a home, we might want to set up a time to visit you, and we can provide our contact info to go out and evaluate how we can best partner together. Just like one of the fire folks said earlier, you may have a delinquent neighbor who's not taking care of their property. Well, we don't want to be that delinquent neighbor, and we're not. We want to partner with you. We allow access to our property for you to create that 100 feet of defensible space through our permit program, our defensible space permit program. So in that program, there's a list of techniques and things you can do in terms of grass cutting, limb clearing, other types of vegetation removal. We will help you through that process. If it's beyond the 100 feet of defensible space, the other part of my answer here is that I've made reference to this document a couple of times, and that's the Vegetation and Biodiversity Management Plan. It's a really good document. It's our department taking a holistic view at our resources across the county and how we prioritize where we're doing fuel reduction. So in some cases, there are specific projects that work right on the edge of the defensible space and with communities. So it could be the case that your 100 feet of defensible space folds right into one of our vegetation management or fuels reduction projects. So that's where we want to have a conversation, figure out how we can maybe build upon the work that you're doing and how what we're doing that you can build upon in your property. If it's not part of that 100 foot of defensible space, again, I think we'd want to just come out and take a look and try to best guide you through how to work together.
Thanks. The next question, there's several questions surrounding hardening of a structure, specifically attic vents. So I'm going to ask Chief Welch to talk a little bit about this, but the retrofitting of homes is a recommendation. You won't see the enforcement of the retrofitting until there's a sizable remodel or some other means that triggers that through the permitting process. But there's a lot of things you can do to be proactive that aren't super expensive, and I'll let Chief Welch speak to that.
So what I'm holding here is a WUI compliant vent. Venting offers two solutions, really. One is to ensure that embers stay out that might come in contact with your structure, but they also are needed to ventilate your space, whether it's your subfloor or your attic, to ensure that you don't have things growing in there that you don't want. And in this case right here, it has a 1/4 inch front with a honeycomb pattern and then a mesh on the back side to ensure that embers don't get in. Attic vents, roof vents are all going to act pretty much similar. The intent is to keep the embers from entering your attic. Any time fire or the embers enter your attic, it's challenging. So there are simple ways that you can harden your home. Changing out your vents to WUI compliant vents is one way forward. And how you know is that they've been listed and reviewed by the State Fire Marshal's office, and there'll be a sticker on it that says that this is a WUI compliant vent, and will offer you the maximum amount of protection, but then also continue to work at providing airflow.
Second part of one of the questions was, as a renter, what do I do with landlords that aren't maintaining defensible space? And really, it's the same thing when we run into problems in neighborhoods. People have to work together here. This is not a solution that we can necessarily always enforce. We can enforce the law and the code, but really it's about working together and looking at the advantages. Maybe it's a cost share piece, maybe it's an explanation, maybe it's an insurance reduction if they do some of the work. So again, the encouragement there is to work with the landlord. Certainly if you have code questions as to whether a building or a facility is not up to code, we encourage you to contact your local fire agency and ask those questions. We're here as resources for you when it gets specific to that. We want to help you answer those questions. Next piece is, will PG&E be in attendance? The answer is no, but I think that's certainly something that concerns all of us. And PG&E has, in some cases, been a very good partner with grant funds to Fire Safe Marin to do vegetation removal work. If you see Davie Tree Service, they're almost exclusively working for PG&E on line clearing. The fire agencies can be a partner in reaching out. PG&E does have a seat on Fire Safe Marin. Their local forester is very engaged. If you have an area of concern, and I'll turn it over to Crystal to discuss a little bit about what the primary land management agencies and fire agencies are sending to the PUC, which manages or at least oversees PG&E.
Right. Our board of directors is very engaged in this issue and has requested staff to reach out to PG&E in an effort to obtain all of their inspection data over the last 5 years, and also have them show us their plans and documentation to comply with the new fire regulations that were issued by CPUC in December of last year. So in 2017, there's new regulations that were put out by the CPUC that require PG&E to increase, for example, the amount of tree clearance on certain lines, whether or not they are classified within certain fire threat areas. There's a high-level threat versus very high. So we actually reached out to PG&E, and after many months of discussions, we finally met with them actually today. And today they sent out, it was amazing, they sent out their vegetation management director for all of this area, North Bay Division. We discussed with him the work that they're doing for tree clearance and complying with the new regs. We also met, present was their distribution manager for line maintenance for the entire state of California, as well as legal counsel. But they were very serious. They took us seriously and met with us. And so from that, we are cautiously optimistic that PG&E is doing a great job to maintain the lines, and they're working hand in hand with us to ensure fire resiliency. That being said, the land manager, Marin County, and ourselves, and Jason, we are still going to send a letter out to CPUC requesting that information that CPUC maintains, that as to ensure that, from both sides, that what they're required to do, that they're doing. And then one of the requests we had was for a new audit, because the last audit was done 5 years ago. And we just found out today that CPUC is indeed conducting a new audit of the North Bay Division in terms of PG&E's compliance with maintenance requirements.
Thank you, Crystal. And again, if you're having an issue getting a hold of PG&E, reach out to your local fire agency, and through Fire Safe Marin, we can work with the forester to get the issue addressed. Next question regarding evacuations. Per Chief Tom Welch, who's here with us tonight, one of the lessons learned takeaways from the North Bay fires was the concept of encouraging aged residents and or mobility impaired persons to pre-evacuate either when a red flag is issued or maybe when there's a fire in the area. I'll broaden up the question a little bit and turn it over to Chief Welch.
Yes, so for our access and functional needs, or people who just don't feel comfortable, about 10 days out of the year in Marin County, our friends at NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric, a couple more, they issue weather warnings out that describe conditions that are prime for burning. And so it happens about 10 days a month here. And in those 10 days, that might, 10 days a year, I'm sorry, 10 days a year. And during those 10 days, that might be an opportunity for you to do a couple things. One is to check and make sure that you have a plan. Is your grab-and-go bag ready? Is your vehicle parked in such a way that you can make an easy egress? Are you tied in with your neighbors, as Chris mentioned, and so that you know who's all there? Or if you don't feel comfortable, and maybe that's time to go stay with Uncle Joe and Aunt Edna for a couple days and just remove yourself from that situation. So those are some opportunities. But the one point that I can't stress enough is neighbors helping neighbors. I had an experience up in Sonoma County, and neighbors have to know each other. They have to be able to help each other, especially the fully facultied ones against the not so fully facultied ones. So it's very important that you know your neighbors, that you have a plan, and pay attention to those red flags. That's the first part of Ready, Set, Go, is to gather information so that you can execute your plan should it be necessary.
Absolutely. Christy, go ahead.
So just tagging on to those red flag conditions where it's prime for a wildland fire at that time. A lot of things you can do have already done, just like Chief Welch mentioned, but some of the basic things are defensible space. So have you worked from your house out 100 feet and removed dead vegetation. You've gotten the needles and the leaves off your roof and out of your gutters. You have created separation between continuous patches of bushes or brush. You've mowed down the weeds up to your property line or 100 feet. Other things you can do, we talked about hardening your home, the vents, keeping your decks cleaned off, keeping flammable material out from underneath your deck. Again, removing dead material is your best defense. A couple questions about the CWPP. The maps that I showed, as well as a bunch of other maps, including some of the fire modeling that was done, it's available on the Fire Safe Marin website. You can download the whole document. And I think there were a couple of questions about trees and vacant lots. So there is a vacant lot code where if there is a structure within, if you have a neighbor who has a vacant lot and you cannot obtain your 100 feet of defensible space because that property owner has not maintained their land, one of the things you can do is call the jurisdictional fire agency. They can do an inspection and document that you cannot meet 100 feet. So you do your clearance up to the property line. One thing that we can do is mail a letter to the vacant lot owner, who's ever paying the taxes, and that code requires them to create a fuel break on the property line so that you can get your 100 feet. It takes a little bit of time. It's not instant. And if you know that vacant property owner, if you can contact them or you have information about them, that helps the fire department but all we have is their mailing address. And so That's our only way to enforce that vacant lot code. In terms of defensible space, it doesn't, just because you have trees next to your property line or on that vacant lot doesn't mean that trees can't be there. We ask people to limb them up and prune them up and make sure that the dead's cut out of them. So just because there's trees in a vacant lot or even on your property doesn't mean we're telling you to cut them all down. Limb them, prune them, good separation. So those are all the basics of defensible space. And all this information is on the Fire Safe Marin website. There's a table out there with lots of handouts if you still need more tools or information on how to create defensible space.
And one step further, if you have questions, your local fire agencies have inspectors that will come out and meet with you, boots on the ground, walk around your property with you, help identify and ask questions or answer questions about neighbors. And we generally don't like to get in neighborhood fights with you, and we encourage neighbors to reach out to one another and work things out. But we're also there to help make movement on this, understanding that an unattended lot is a problem for everybody in the community. Next question: do you have an egress plan for the Ross Valley in case of a major fire, and how is it plan being communicated to the residents? Can Supervisor Drake handle the mass traffic that will come in and the fire? And these are very good questions. Okay, so one of the slides Chris Riley had was our evacuation plans. So we've taken every area of the county, identified the primary evacuation routes off of major streets that are tied in or connected with staging areas, and these are pre-programmed, as we discussed, in the alert system that the sheriff's office has. And when those alerts go out, we'll evacuate certain areas. And we may choose, and people always want a steadfast, hard, I need an evacuation plan for my neighborhood. Well, you need to understand multiple ways out, because if it's a turnaround day and we get a west wind pushing hard and we have a fire, it's different than an east wind in the fall that we see, like drove the fires in the North Bay. And having preset plans can lead to failure. Some may be a notification that we want you to shelter in place because we need to get bulldozers and engines in, and then we're going to evacuate you. Because if we can put out the fire, we eliminate the evacuation need, or at least can shorten it down. So that's one of the questions. Can Sir Francis Drake handle it? Unfortunately, and this goes into some of the code questions, we're in a built environment. It would be nice to widen out Sir Francis Drake to 4 lanes, certainly, but I'm sure there's a lot of residents along the way that would be upset when you bulldoze their house. So that's one of the challenges. Marin County was really a bunch of little summer cabins before the Golden Gate Bridge, and the roads and infrastructure we have today is a challenge, no doubt, and access and egress issues are all of our problems, including the public agencies, and that's one of the things we're really taking a hard look at with our public works agencies, cities, towns, and counties, as well as in the CWPP and identifying those. But I hope that answers your question.
I have another thing on evacuation routes. One more note on evacuation routes. We actually need your help because there's a lot of vegetation that's encroaching our evacuation routes, our roads and streets. And so things like overhanging trees, branches, brush, those kinds of things, if that vegetation's on your property, we need you to help us maintain that. We don't have enough resources to clear all the roads. So if it's your vegetation, we need your help to limb those trees, cut that brush back, and keep it mowed back so we can get equipment through, as well as the extra cars, trash cans, trailers, all that stuff that clogs the route. So think about that as a street group or a homeowners group or just neighbors. Think about that. We need help with that.
And does Marin Municipal Water District ensure that there's enough water flow to pump up a hill? Can one assume that if you live or have a water hydrant or a fire hydrant, there's enough water pressure? And certainly one of the issues they had up in Fountain Grove was when you have 3/4 inch pipes open and spraying, and you have thousands of them, your water pressure is going to deplete. But I'll let Crystal maybe answer some. We work very closely with the water district when we do have a fire or fire flow needs.
Yes, definitely. Whenever there's large fire events, we have what we call valve men on site there to help change valving in order to bring other pump stations online or divert water from tank sites. But with our fire flow program, we have really looked at pipeline diameters and pressure and flow and volume and been able to increase, do work. We've increased fire flow to 85 miles of pipeline in the last 10 years. And with that, also increased flow capacity to over 400 fire hydrants. We certainly are investing in our capital program to increase fire flow. We report regularly to the municipalities and our board on that effort.
Thank you, Crystal. And then to the law enforcement partners here, one of the questions, how does law enforcement engage in evacuations? What's the process and how does it work?
Well, when there's an event that happens in, say, a city and the city doesn't have the resources, there's a statewide mutual aid plan that they would contact their local sheriff, and it would be our responsibility to find those resources. And if we didn't have them countywide, then we would go statewide. And all the time I've been here, we've never been denied the resources that we need. But that would be law enforcement's primary responsibility in a catastrophe, whether it would be flooding, earthquake, or fire, is to provide evacuation. And I know this was one of the big things when we met with the Sonoma County people, especially in Santa Rosa, is when they had to evacuate large residential areas, and they had to throw lots of resources. So it wouldn't be a thing where people would be stopping at stoplights. There would be law enforcement all along the route to get people out as quickly as possible. And that would be our primary responsibility. And also, when we were assisting Sonoma, it's also being in areas to prevent egress after the event occurred.
Sheriff, a plea to hear what agencies plan on doing and not just telling residents what to do. Good question, and I hope that was answered here tonight with a lot of the discussions that these actions occurred long before the events of the North Bay or Southern California. And from my perspective, I've never seen a level of collaboration amongst public agencies, from land management agencies to law enforcement to the Office of Emergency Services. We have a variety of, I think, 16 fire agencies in the county, but operationally we really act as one. We align our codes so there's consistency for contractors and residents across the county. And when we need something from one another, it's not even a phone call, it's predetermined, and those resources start moving immediately upon the request. So 52-ish%, I believe, of the county is privately owned, and that includes most residential structures. So this isn't about us or you. This is really a thing together. We're going to make a difference in order to protect our communities. And certainly you're the engaged group that's here tonight, but we need the other 252,000 residents to join us in this conversation as we move forward. What areas of the CWPP identified as the greatest risks for fire currently, and where can we get those on a map showed for our records?
So I think I mentioned that the CWPP is online, and all those maps and a discussion about the analysis is available in the document. And it's the core of it's like 90 pages, so you can download it.
And understand that the CWPP is a layer of GIS mapping. So we took areas of concern, we took population, we took fuel modeling, and then we laid fire across the landscape under different weather patterns to give us this. So it's a heavily science-based document that helps us make decisions and prioritize fuel reduction projects, as well as inspections and other things. Chief Welch, what, if any, planning with the elder care or skilled nursing facilities is there to assure safe evacuation of residents?
So, great question. There is work in your local jurisdictions with these facilities to ensure that they have an adequate plan for evacuation. There are various sizes. Some are several hundred beds or rooms, all the way down to a house with 3 bedrooms and everything in between. And so, although the smaller ones, prudence would dictate that they have a plan. I don't know that they're regulated, but the larger ones, your fire marshals are meeting with those folks to ensure that they have adequate plans going forward.
And many, if not all, the high schools require the students to complete hours of community service. The county has an excess of vases, French broom, Scotch broom, fuel ladders, etc. We all agree with that, and we certainly agree that these young individuals could use some good physical labor. So I'll turn it over to, I know our land management agencies use a lot of volunteer hours, and so maybe Jim can answer some of that.
We will definitely sign off on any extra credit slips that's needed to complete their homework assignments. But we do have a robust volunteer engagement program. I think last year we had about 9,000 hours of volunteer service, which was dedicated to hand pulling weeds, doing sheet mulching, other integrated pest management types of projects that help us suppress weeds manually. But, you know, we have dedicated volunteer coordinators. We have weekly events where we're engaging the community, volunteer groups, nonprofit groups, environmental-based community groups, corporations, you know, a wide spectrum of different partners that we're working on a variety of projects with. And certainly high school youth are more than welcome to join us on any of those, and often do.
Thanks, Jim. Who is managing the range from China Camp State Park behind some of the neighborhoods in Rollingwood, Glenwood, and I'll ask Cindy to speak to state parks and specifically China Camp, what's being done there?
Well, in China Camp, we're actually getting ready to have a meeting with Marin County Fire and our local operator at the park, Friends of China Camp, to assess what we can do in the park that we haven't done already. There's certainly room for improvement. We have done fuel breaks along the boundary of China Camp in some locations, working with Marin County Fire and some of the homeowner groups. There's room for some of these high school students that need to get out and get exercise to come out and pull broom. Another thing we're going to be looking at some of the fire roads in the park and some of these boundary areas. So we have room for improvement, but we're working on it.
Thank you, Cindy. How do we balance maintaining wildlife habitat without sacrificing defensible space? Example, in the city of Novato, removal of a dead tree and habitat balance. So I will turn it over to the land management and maybe Christy to look at how we find that balance.
So the question is balancing fuel reduction with habitat concerns. So I'm glad that came up again because I didn't really touch on it in the question that came up earlier about downed trees or dead material that might be in some proximity to personal property. You know, I think that obviously there's a lot of concern about wildfire, and it's easy to look at every piece of vegetation out there as a matchstick. And frankly, a lot of wood or down wood does have habitat value, and we're managing our preserves in hopefully a balanced way that protects residents, especially within that 100 feet or more of structures, while also protecting biodiversity interests and habitat interests. So, again, our holistic look at our projects through our vegetation, and again, we explicitly put the word biodiversity in that work plan, is that we want to look at balancing both of those needs. And I think that the project list that's in there, without rattling all of those off right now, I think it sums up to be about 1,800 acres of treatment this year. Strives to strike that balance between protecting our land, our neighbors, and protecting all the resources that everyone cares about, and was the reason behind establishing these beautiful spaces.
And I think it's fair to say that the fire agencies struggle with the land management agencies historically over this balance, and we've come a long way in understanding each other's missions and how we can take a project, find the benefit of defensible space and fire protection for a community, at the same time finding mutual benefit in biodiversity. So we've come light years from where we were, which is wonderful, and I think why you're seeing this panel, we've all been together down this road and understand each other's work much better and are able to collaborate and use our resources more wisely because we don't have a ton of them. In the event of power outage, do Marin County local district fire trucks carry gas pumps to pump water from residential pools? Also, are there backup gas generators to pump water for fire hydrants? This was not the case for the Thomas Fire. So all of the wildland fire engines in Marin County throughout the different agencies carry gas portable pumps that we can use a water source, whether it be a lake, pond, swimming pool, and found it quite effective in the firefight in the North Bays as water was, certainly a commodity to be found. The Water District and North Marin Water both have backup pump systems to keep the system pressurized in the event of a power loss. So we are as prepared as we can be. One of the challenges, again, when you lose thousands of homes in an area, you have open butts. So again, we'd be working with the Water District to get those areas shut down to the residential feeds and try to limit that water loss so we have pressure. But we do have gas pumps and on all the trucks, and then the system is backed up. Some of us have HOAs, neighborhood associations, that are not interested in any preparedness. What do we do? How are we not part of the groups? There are hundreds of us, and this is very true. How do we motivate the unmotivatable? And that's not a word. I think that this is where the firewise discussion comes up with communities, and certainly engaging everybody you can. It takes a small group usually to energize an entire community, and peer pressure is absolutely one of the best, persuasive items that are out there. And we, the fire agencies, and I'm speaking collectively, are here to partner with you to engage the community leaders. And again, most of them are you sitting in this room, and we're here to partner with you and champion this, get the messages out, help get a meeting started, and work with your entire community.
Jason, can I just add to that? There was a question asked earlier that you sort of answered, but I think it kind of goes to that too. And it was something along the lines of, what will you, us, the government, do beyond telling us, the citizens, what to do? And I think you touched on something very important, which is everybody has responsibility in this, and so certainly it's within the capability of a city council or the board of supervisors to adopt regulations, which I think we should do. But part of what I think the local government is doing is very deliberately looking at what we've been doing and looking at the examples of our neighbors to the north, what they experienced, and then looking very soberly at what we should do. And some of that is to recommend regulations that will be the responsibility of private property owners to address, the vegetation management and changing building standards. But the other part is priorities from elected bodies. And so whether it's the Board of Supervisors or a city council, to make choices with the funds that they have. And so that's the annual budget process, and that's to put dollars and emphasis, both policy emphasis but also funding toward the efforts to address preparedness and prevention. And so all the things we've been talking about are steps that we, the government, must take, whether it's around infrastructure improvement, so to remove vegetation from our rights-of-way, our roadways, or to improve bridges or pinch points where fire trucks have difficulty getting to a neighborhood or through a neighborhood. Also, taking a look at the infrastructure that we heard about down here with water facilities. Some of that are things which we have in our budgets, but others are things that we know about that we need to make much more clear to the public about infrastructure repair, and sometimes that goes to funding. Again, back to priorities, the issue of communication is one that boards of supervisors and councils and folks like me have great opportunities to share with the public about the importance of cooperation and preparedness. And so we should use our tools of communication, whether it's meetings like this or newsletters or the newspaper, to share that. I think it all comes down to an ethic of collaboration and cooperation and recognizing the responsibility that we all have together. And so if there's an HOA that doesn't want to participate, they should be encouraged to participate, and they're encouraged by their neighbors, and they're encouraged by the example that we all, whether we're government or neighborhoods, provide to each other, that we're very, very serious about this. We're going to take our responsibility seriously. We're going to make budgeting decisions to reflect that, and then I think neighborhoods need to take their own responsibility to influence that. The fact that we have so many firewise communities is a wonderful example and reflection of the seriousness that citizens are taking on their own to address the issue. And I think that we, the government, need to encourage that and to foster that and to make that easier so that we can eliminate the red tape, eliminate the things which might be impediments to that, and really provide information, examples, go out, be helpful to people, and then also have the stick. And so when folks are not cooperating, they're not playing by the rules, they're creating difficulty, we should be very forceful in abating those things. And then we ourselves should also be good examples of that. We should continue to work cooperatively with each other so that we're showing very good example of how it should be done. The good news is that I think here in Marin County, we actually have a lot of success. And so I think we should build on that success, and we should use things like this to explain to people what we're already doing, why we are doing it, and really encourage participation so we can continue with our success and really build on that.
And Dawn, if you'll chime in on that, and then I've got one more for you, which is the insurance policy renewal cancellations. What do we do, and how can we help address the cancellations that are some of our policy holders? And Christy's been working on this quite a bit also.
Okay. I had a couple of thoughts about the earlier question about how to get the homeowners associations engaged. One is that, whoever it is that sits on the board of those homeowners associations have a fiduciary obligation to the membership to protect their interests. And certainly one of the ways in which they ought to be protecting those interests at this point is to be clearing defensible space and doing other things that are necessary to both comply with the law as well as to protect the interests of the individual homeowners. And I think that's a case that, individual members could make pretty compellingly to the board. And then I also understand that there's at least one insurance company, if not more, who offer discounts to policyholders who are participating in firewise. And so if that's true, then it seems that that might be a way to get the homeowners association to be a little bit more responsive as well.
Thank you, Don. Christy, your experiences?
So a couple things that he touched on. USAA is the insurance company that will provide discounts if you're one of those firewise sites. If you are given a letter that an insurance company isn't going to renew your homeowner's insurance, you might take a look at your defensible space, because some of the companies are sending out doing drive-by inspections, and they might see too much vegetation. Some of them are looking at Google Earth and seeing too much vegetation. So look at your defensible space. You can call your local fire department agency and have them come and document an inspection and document whether you meet the state law or the county fire code for defensible space. And I know at least in West Marin, we've had a lot of success for the most part doing inspections, and if the property owner meets defensible space requirements, we can document that, write a letter, and you can submit that to your insurance company. And I mean, the insurance company can still choose to deny you, but so far it's worked, although I'm not sure what the future holds for us in terms of the great losses north of here, how that might change some of the insurance companies' process.
All righty, and as we're approaching 8 o'clock, I want to be mindful of your time. There's still quite a few question cards. We pulled a lot of different questions from as many areas as we could and tried not to duplicate, but we will make this part of our discussion as we move forward this committee and include all of the questions. And your input tonight is help driving the decisions we're going to make as what needs adjustment. We're hearing from you on the social media platforms, through letters to the editor. This process, all of us are easily accessible. and certainly want your comments and your feedback and your input as we move forward. The climate's changing, and we need to be prepared for it. We have a challenge ahead of us, but collectively we can do this, both the community as well as public agencies. I'd like to give the two supervisors an opportunity for any closing statements, and then thank all of you for being here. We do appreciate it.
Okay, well, first of all, I want to thank you, Jason, for all the work that you've done in preparing this and in really putting this whole idea of preparedness on the front burner. I want to thank the sheriff for coming tonight. I want to thank the county and city staff that are here. And then I want to thank you all for coming and for your interest in this. This has been a lot to digest tonight, and we're not going to give you a pop quiz because I don't think any of us could probably pass it. But I think that what we can do is that Supervisor Rodoni and I, you can contact us with any questions, with any statements, or with any concerns if you go to marincounty.org and click on our names. One thing I know that we didn't talk about tonight was warning, foghorn, siren in the different cities and county, and I do think that there's interest in that. At least people want to know how that works. San Francisco does it still. So we are going to look at that, and I think, Jason, we can put all of this on our website for people to comment and to get answers. And another thing that Supervisor Rodoni and I are doing is that we are requesting the county put in the county budget this year, a full-time staff person to deal with emergency preparedness for the communities in the neighborhood and countywide. So we'll be looking at that in March.
Thank you, Supervisor Arnold. I want to thank you all for your questions tonight and for attending. I think you may have heard tonight that our public land managers, our fire, and our cities are doing a lot to prepare with their vegetation management, to prepare for that next fire. All of them, almost all of them across the board, are increasing their budgets, some doubling their budgets for vegetation management. But at the end of the day, this still is a public-private partnership. We need to be a partner on this. You need to work in your neighborhoods with us, and we need to continue that through Fire Safe Marin, through Firewise Marin, use all the things that are available to us. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a safe drive home.